Yeah, one of the things that I'm always surprised about is just how long it takes guys to ask for help. There was this one guy who came to a men's health meeting, this charity that I used to work at, and it took him 3 years to come along and to ask for help, you know, just to share what he had going on. But just that fear just kept him locked inside for 3 years. And I just found that so utterly sad.
I'm not surprised, I think often men, there's a realization around mental health that comes when it's too late. And that's because there isn't enough awareness around mental health. There still is a group of men out there, quite a chunk of men, I think, who think mental health is still something you've made up in your head. And so it's only when it comes crashing down, and it's only when the coping mechanisms stop working, that these spaces become something that people want to go to then, or even consider. And then there's this huge upheaval trying to just delayer and, okay, am I going to be accepted here? Am I going to be judged here? Am I going to be seen as I'm weak? I'm less of a man? And all of this pejorative ideas of self then kicks in.
Yeah.
But mental health is like physical health. It has its highs and it has its lows, and sometimes it's nothing of your doing. Sometimes it's ancestral, sometimes it's communal issues. How do we really know what's going on around us isn't actually impacting us mentally? What's going on around the world?
Yeah.
The fact that every few seconds a child dies. How do we know how much of that is impacting us? And then within that is the layer of what you're going through. And I think that this realization around mental health has to have a broader sense, a broader parameter of how we look at it. When we look at it just as individual, just me and what I'm going through, it takes a long time to get there. But when we look at what's happening in society and how much it's impacting us, and we think, how can we help each other? And you become part of helping others, then you begin to become part of the one who can actually be helped as well when you're struggling.
It's a big part of my story on a personal level on this. When I go back to when I did my first round of CBT, when I found out I had OCD back when I was around 18 or 19 years old, what put me off even getting the help at that point in time was, if I accept that this is like something that I need, then it means that there's something wrong with me. That was my first conclusion, that there's normal people and people who can function, and then there's me, and I'm at a lower level than this. And that was my thinking at that point in time. That was my very immature, very basic understanding of what the situation was. And it came to a point where I had to ask myself, is this how I want to live? It genuinely came to, like you said before, this idea of, at what point does it become so unbearable to keep living in a certain way? And that's we could have easily caught that much earlier on, but we have to just be in a place of accepting that, yeah, genuinely, can life be different? Can it be better? Can it just be, at the very least, different? That's the key part, just from the curious angle. But within that, can it be better? And once I learned to accept that, actually, therapy is literally just talking to somebody else and trying to make sense of the million thoughts you've got going on, I started to realize, actually, it's not this complete moral fault that I've got. I'm not abnormal. There's nothing wrong with me. It's just I've got some unhelpful thoughts which need addressing. And that's obviously within the CBT world from my personal story, but it's the exact same thought that happened 10 years later when I started to become part of men's circles. It was I shouldn't really go to a men's circle because there's nothing wrong with me. And that was still my thought at that point in time. And it's like, why does there have to be something wrong with me? What does that even mean, first of all, as a question? But beyond that, why can't I just go to actually be with other men and see what thoughts they're having, see how I'm different to them, see what I can learn from them, to stop putting myself under all this pressure to be the only one who is in charge of my own happiness and my own flourishing and my own survival. I can actually reach out to a community and think, oh, actually, it's quite nice to be part of something bigger. And I think there's a lot of men who, at this point in time, who are burdened because they feel like they've got to solve it all themselves. And it's just that's one thought pattern, but there are many other thought patterns you can have from that.
There's something that you said in there as well, which is so key. Like, I've heard it so many times before, is like, it's not that bad. I'm not as bad as somebody else. Yeah. And they constantly measure their own pain or trauma or grief or loss or whatever it is against that of somebody else. and they feel bad for needing any help whatsoever. And that narrative is unreal. Like, it's so common, so common. And I've seen it in a group of men before where everyone's having a deep share. We're all on different journeys. We've got slightly different things going on. But this guy then opens up for the first time, and collectively everyone's like, dude, that's a lot. Like, there's nothing small about what you've just shared. Like, there's nothing you should be ashamed about with anything that you've just said. And just the sheer shock on that individual's face when he's received, without judgment, without advice, without trying to be fixed or solved, they just hold it collectively. You know, I've had guys break down in a share circle before, absolutely break down in tears. And every other guy in the room is looking to me, just like, fuck, 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 fuck. You can see it in their eyes, like fucking fear of it. Like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And I just maintain presence with the gentleman that's sharing and the gentleman that's broken down. And then all of a sudden, everyone else starts to co-regulate from me and say, it's okay. Don't need to do anything. Don't need to put a hand on him. Don't need to rescue him with words. Don't need to make a joke of the situation to create some levity because we don't know how to hold the sadness or the pain or the grief. And just collectively being able to feel into that silence, and so that it's okay and it's enough simply to be present with one another in that space. And the change in literally one circle or 4 circles or 5 circles is monumental. And just seeing how these guys relax into that space of safety is absolutely phenomenal. It really is.
It's where we resonate also, isn't it? If we're in a society that resonates with the material, then you can fix your way through what you can tangibly pick up. But mental health isn't something that you can quantify. It's not something you can tangibly hold. And so it's like, oh, that's that voodoo stuff. What is that? This is something out there. And it's that realization, actually, it's as real as physical health. In fact, it's you. It's just that you're weighed down. That's the first thing I think men have to overcome, is this realization that mental health is real. And there are ways to improve your mental health. And I think that's one of the things to begin to understand is we don't really want to catch the men once they've fallen. You actually want to catch men when you want them to help rise, help you with your improving your mental health. But the problem there is a huge education element there. Because when men begin to understand, or I think as a society even, when we begin to understand what mental health is, often it's when there's a problem, as opposed to being cultured and nurtured into realizing actually mental health is something we should be educated on, we should be nurtured in this.
Yeah, 100%.
It's a huge part within education. Obviously, with my job being in schools for the past 10 years, you see this isn't just a problem that affects men, it affects boys as well, at all levels, at all ages. And it's this question around emotional intelligence. I think that's the key thing here, where typically if a boy has like a difficult emotion to handle, then it's comfortable to express it as anger. And in that situation there, it's like, right, fine, we'll just go outside, we'll have a fight, and then we'll be friends again at the end of it all. Because I've got all this energy that's all been built up. I don't know how to disperse it, because I've never been taught how to disperse it. So as a result, this is the only way I know how. And like this primitive biological urge comes out. Not in all boys, but there's a large sample of boys where that's going to be the key way of actually releasing that, without realizing actually there's healthier ways of expressing that same anger. There's first of all understanding that anger isn't a bad emotion, it's not a negative emotion. There's nothing wrong with you morally just because you feel anger. Like, if anything, it can be quite good very, very often that certain things do make you annoyed. That shows you're actually an incredibly moral person. If you see an injustice and you get angry at that, like, that's telling you something about your character at that point in time. So we can't just abstractly say, oh, here's what a good emotion looks like, here's what a bad emotion looks like. It's always within context. And what we need to try to get to the stage at with education, starting within schools to work with, again, obviously this would be relevant for all humans, but our conversation here between men and, as a result, boys, it comes down to the giving people options to realize, to open their mind that, yeah, you can express it this way, but you can express it 5 other ways as well. Let's see which ones happen to work with you. If you're a very physically fit boy and that's something that you really value, which is a question itself, how many boys even know what they value and what type of man they want to become. But if, let's say that they are very physically fit, they might want to express that through going to the gym, through doing sprints, through physical release in that sense. If someone's a bit more like emotionally involved and maybe a bit more in touch with the creative side, like journaling. Has anyone ever taught them how to journal, how to write things down, how to write down their thoughts and actually structure them? Because that's an expression as well. And again, with all this, there's the cultural layer and there's the family origin and how they understand the idea of a masculine versus feminine and how that's going to be expressed. There's so many topics within these topics that it essentially never ends. So you have to just pick one and start messily. Instead of looking for the perfect starting point, just picking a starting point and then learning from there, just from your journey.
There's something that you said there and something that Razwan said as well that really resonate. Like, we're not taught mental health. We're not taught about mindset, resilience, access to a full spectrum of emotions. You know, just what you were mentioning there about anger, that's so present. Like just crying as well. You know, if a child falls over, scrapes their knee, and the parent just says, oh, be a man, just grow up, you know, pick that up, you know, stop crying. And then they're constantly told that message. And then they become a teenager and the mum says, why don't you talk to me? You never tell me what's going on. And it's like, fuck me. For 10 years you've been telling me not to cry and to be a man. And that's all you've said to me. That's the only narrative that you've ever given me. So when we think about resilience and mindset and what does it mean to look after ourselves and what does self-care look like, we've got no script of that because we've never been taught it. I've only learnt boundaries for myself in the last 4 years and I'm 41. You know, I've only started to think about myself and to put myself first from a health perspective.
And and it draws onto also this notion that there's old emotions and there's new emotions, and often if there's no education, no understanding around mental health, you won't know the difference. And it's like somebody triggers you and you get all angry and you think they caused this anger, not realizing this whole years of anger that's not been processed, that's just bubbling up and it just comes out. And anger in the moment is a good thing. I think anger is a very natural aspect of what it means to be human, but it's how you express it. If it's an old anger, that's going to come out in the most violent way because it's been bubbling up and it's been eating away in the inside. But if somebody's doing wrong towards someone, that's righteous indignation. You've got to stop it. Stop this right now. This is not allowed. You put a boundary in place. You then are able to express yourself in an angry way, but in a way that's intentional. But if the old emotion is still bubbling up, then it's going to come out in the most hurtful way towards them, and it ends up in regret. So mental health journeying is also about distinguishing between an old emotion and a new emotion. And anyone listening to this has to really understand that mental health is it's a reality. How you face it is up to you, and how you face it is in the company of other men, where you can actually mirror each other. And that's what these circles do. They allow us to be able to see each other, hear each other, and realize, oh, that's language that he's using, that's now giving me language.